Hello, today is Monday, July 22nd, 2019. This is the Testing Commons office hours. We have more people here today. Yay. Um, so let's open up the agenda and see where we're at. Share my screen. All right. So just a reminder, here's kind of the current set of priorities we have for the 116 cycle. There's not much new to this. P0 is basically refactoring the framework so it's more easily importable to the outside world. This is primarily useful for everyone who's making CRD-based anything, as well as the cloud providers and all the other stuff we're trying to move out of tree. Second one was P1 was the user experience stuff. That is been kind of a far and distant second. I have not created an issue to federate the work for what I would consider to be a cleaner user experience, especially from the component config perspective. Although this is important, it's just not been a high priority for me at the time. Last but not least is general test cleanup and hygiene, because it's all over the map. So today, this is 22nd. First item on the discussion was, I don't know who put this here.
I put it.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So that one is just a small thing that we that Jiatong and I came across while working on one of the PRs. There's been some work on trying to clean up calling errors and all that type. The PR that merged the script essentially runs against the CI blocking jobs on Kubernetes, and it prevents anyone from using Gomega Expect or any of its variances. As you can see in the screen, just going for a message of use framework expect no error. Expect no error being a wrapper for Gomega with offset equal to 1. So that means that the whatever error happens is going to be sent to the caller of the function that failed, not the function itself. So just wanted to throw it out there. If I never saw this go through any mention in any of the channels, SIG testing code organization, and it seems a little bit arbitrary to just block the Omega expect, given that people actually use a lot more Omega throughout the test. Also, the motivation for pushing that into CI is there's another issue that I linked in the notes where it says the title is destroy the Omega expect pattern, but the actual item that people were looking to get out of that one is to just annotate all the tests. So so whenever something failed, it didn't look like that thing where it just says expect no error and nothing whatsoever. So yeah, thoughts, opinions.
It's possible that we might want to expect to be more, to produce more cleanly output than what the current output currently does, which we could absolutely do if we wanted to. This issue is so old.
Yeah. Also the other thing, and I guess one of the reasons why it matters a little bit more to us is, for example, within the framework, the function that the script mentions is that we have to use is framework expect no error, which is a wrapper for Omega expect with offset equal to 1.
Mm-hmm.
There is no wrapper for just a plain Omega expect. So if we actually want to, so let's say that we have let's say that we do some refactoring where a function returns an error instead of actually failing within that function. So in order to keep the behavior as expected, we need to keep the offset equal to 0 from the caller. And the only way that we can keep the behaviors is it will be to actually call behavior from the framework called the I forget what it's called, but the function that expect no error actually calls, which is not a big deal, but it looks a little bit, again, it just looks a little bit arbitrary.
So I would expect that we have the ability to call a line number emitting error function from the top level. But one of the things that I don't like is that we call the escape hatch for error conditions within certain areas that is weird, right? Like doing it within the test seems fine because it ejects from the test, but there are preconditions where we eject earlier, like that one wrapper that Jaiton tried to make changes to, and that one is really weird because it's in the precondition before everything. I don't have strong feelings here other than like, I think it might make sense for us to start to document what we consider to be best practices for how to emit errors in your tests. And maybe that's a more general thing that we should be doing. Like when is the best place and when should you use certain types of tools within the framework? Because right now, it is, like I mentioned earlier, it is not consistent in that we emit errors in some conditions and we do weird failure conditions in other ones that are in the before each suite, right?
Yes. Yeah. So for that documentation, what would be a good place for it to live under the community contributors develop?
There is a testing subsection. I have to take a look at it and find it. But there is definitely a testing subsection which outlines like all the tags that exist, and maybe we should have a best practices as we start to dig deeper into the corpus of goo that is there.
Okay. The other thing that I just wanted to check, so the CI script, just keep it as is, even though the issue actually just wanted to make sure that all have annotations.
I personally think that this is totally unneeded, unwarranted. You don't need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is superfluous, right? Like we have so many verify and checks that like there's no benefit to this, right?
Yeah.
It is just like you should be using a best practice. But if anything, then we should add a full lint that basically says, here are all the practices and here are the things we're not doing, right? This seems pretty arbitrary. And it doesn't seem like it was prioritized by this group, right? Like, did this originally come from Omichi?
Yeah.
See, like there are so many more high value targets that Omichi and company could be focusing on that could be aligned with the priorities that we have set here. And I think if somebody sees something like this, to put a hold on the issue and assign it to me, because I know I didn't greenlight this thing.
Yeah. I actually went to the history, and that's another reason why I wanted to bring it up for discussion. It really didn't went through much of a code review. It was just it was actually it was a derivation of a cleanup that people were doing in some other E2E tests. So just wanted to keep it in there. So it's a little bit arbitrary, but is it worth removing it, or should we just leave it or fix it, improve it to actually flag a framework expect no test that don't have any annotation?
Why don't we? I wouldn't have allowed this to go through. I don't know who allowed it to go through because it's arbitrary. Right? It's not consistent with a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
And he's been doing this a lot. Like he's been pushing PRs that I'm like, what's the purpose of this? Maybe if you can find the PR that originally allowed this to go through, please assign it. Please poke me on Slack, and I'll go back and I might even revert it.
Okay, sounds good. So action item for me.
Yeah.
Documentation wise, you'll find a good home for best practices to live.
Yeah, I think it should be in the same location of where the existing documentation is regarding the tags. But yes, why don't you action item for me to follow up and give you a link.
Okay, sounds
We'll play link tag in this afternoon.
okay, sounds good. So at least that's all that you wanted to bring up.
Um, I have a Monday's usually my go through my backlog, which I have not gotten through yet because I'm dealing with a couple other things. So I don't have an up to date information of where we are across the tests. Usually that's my Monday job. How do folks? Does anyone else have insight into things that need attention currently with regards to the testing framework reviews?
I think we're just kind of going through them slowly, like not much to update from last week other than I saw Jitang's PR go through, and there's a few other in progress that are just doing, like the expect no error refactors, things like that. But we're moving along. I think one thing that is coming up often that seems to be blocking a lot of people is a lot of the is master checks or is control plane checks, things like that. There's still a lot of contention around at what point do we consider a node a control plane node, and how do we actually change the behavior of the test based on that?
So I'm going to kind of rely on, there is a separate feature request from Clayton in the enhancements repository. And I'm going to kind of rely on them to actually fix both Clayton and Jordan to actually fully flush out the details. I do know that there's a lot of feedback from Justin Santa Barbara on this that says you're saying this is not good and we shouldn't be doing it, but you're not giving us what we should be doing. So as a result, we don't actually have we don't have a replacement that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Lubomir, do you have other insights there?
So I made some comments to basically what Clayton suggested. To my understanding, the flexibility of Kubernetes extended to the point where we don't have a clear definition whether a node is hosting a control plane. And right now, we have a lot of deployers in the ecosystem depending on the master label, including COPS, KVDM, and so on. Historically, Justin explained that the deployers agreed to this label, and but again, Clayton is saying that it's not official, it's not part of the core. So maybe I was thinking that the deployers can employ a consensus on this label outside of core, the committee of the deployers agreeing on a label that makes sense.
That should be SIG cluster lifecycle then. We should bring this up within SIG cluster lifecycle, and maybe we even produce a document that says here are the best practices or general guidelines on label semantics for deployed clusters.
Yes, definitely. Now, the question remains, however, how are we going to handle any arbitrary cluster with the framework? And basically, the suggestion there was, I already walked the ticket for this. The suggestion there was to employ granularity on the demands that the framework has from a particular node. For instance, can we schedule workloads on this node instead of asking for a particular label? And somebody signed to work on this. However, I think he got scared after he realized that it's not so simple. Because the isMaster call is present in a number of areas, including tests. So I'm going to get back to this ticket after some time, and maybe, it already has the help wanted, but I didn't really want to jump on it. Instead, leave someone else if they want to work on this.
Well, that's fair. It's thorny and it's weird and it's going to break tests. So we'll find it out immediately. So, we'll know when something's broken.
Yes, I do agree with them that it's simply the architecture that is not allowing us to do this. But I wonder if the labels should be something that we are checking off regardless, given the label is something that is supported in the ecosystem by so many deployers. So, if the label does not exist, maybe we can have a fallback to check for the actual granularity that we want, or maybe it should be the other way around.
So I have not looked at to see what tests or what preconditions and before each rely on the master component being there. I would expect that the test would straight up fail because for certain conditions, because without the ability to communicate to the API server, right?
Yes,
Let me take a look at the tests. Is there an issue that outlines the testing changes that might be needed?
Just a second. I can share the ticket in chat. The ticket originally, Andrew said it. Basically, there is a discussion linked inside this ticket. It points to the original PR that attempted to do a change on this function. Basically, the diff shows all the tests in the framework and in the suite that use this function, basically. I'm seeing stuff like checking whether there is a controller manager on this node. So it might be tricky. It's a very generic assumption that should be modified.
It looks like this person is not actually working on it.
Yes.
He said he's not, because the last comment here was a week ago saying he was.
That's why I wanted to leave this for a while. Maybe he is going to get back to this with a response.
Okay.
I think arguably the trickiest part of the diff that basically shows the usage of his master node is inside the list of get master and worker nodes or die. That's basically the generic assumption where we enumerate what nodes we have. So it's quite tricky. This means that we can no longer have this function. We can no longer say that we have a list of master nodes. So it's definitely not a good first issue, that's for sure.
Well, let's just leave it open for the time being. We'll notice immediately if it's messed up because a bunch of stuff will fail in kubeDM deployers, right? It'll also fail in COPS. Like it'll fail all over the place if it's doing tip of master. So we'll find out.
Yes, just somebody has to bite the bullet to send a PR to change this.
Okay.
And we can run.
Go ahead.
We can run the kind pre-submits that last time they were able to catch the change that Jordan was trying to do in the same space with the master label in the framework.
Oops. I think I said. Let me hit accept. Are there other things to discuss today? I don't really have much because I haven't gone through the backlog. I'm still in the process of doing that. It's Monday.
So, hi team. So currently we have all the wrappers for the Omega expect errors that in the framework U2.go. So are we planning to move those wrappers into a new package or just to leave it there?
Expect error? No, I think expect error is fundamental to the framework. And I even put a comment in there where somebody was trying to make that change, and I said no.
Okay.
So because if you're going to use the framework, you would expect to use expect error as part of the default for the framework. I think it gets weird when there's when you're using the utility libraries, right? That's the reason why the granularity was set there in the beginning. So there's only a finite set of tests that use a certain set of utilities, so only import that utility library for the test that is needed. Otherwise, the framework pretty much depends upon the ability to call expect error or expect no error.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we at here? Lubomir, you said allow to specify an IP family to the testing framework?
Yes, quickly to the previous point, I have to say that I really like that we are wrapping Go Omega with the function we have for expect no error.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this because it allows us to swap or maybe add more logic inside the function, like we can have a stack trace and things like that. Currently, if you look at the failing tests, it just says something like error waiting for the condition, and you don't have any way to navigate the problem.
Yeah, it's sometimes when I fail in the tests, like if I'm actually debugging stuff on my own, I insert panics inside of the tests. If I was creating a new test in the original days of creating the framework and all the other stuff, if something were to fail, I would randomly insert a panic because that would give me yield the entire stack trace. And there are easy ways to output the entire stack frame as part of the expect error. And I think that's a worthwhile effort for folks to be able to do if folks want to do that. We currently don't have that on the to-do list, but I would not be opposed to that type of work.
Jetong, do you want to take an action item to work on this?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, thanks. I added this next item because the IPv6 / dual stack people are currently trying to implement some new flags in the framework, and my immediate response was that we should not do this anymore. And instead, the proposal originally was to implement some sort of auto detection whether a particular test depends on dual stack IPv6 or IPv4, and but the comments were in the lines of, no, it's not easy for us to do this, let's add the flag, maybe we can remove it later. So the question I had here is like, can we tolerate these temporary flags, or it's a complete no at this point to add flags?
So here's my problem with this, and I allowed Patrick to get away with a bunch of stuff like that too. This was the same problem that kubeadm was suffering from, and then we just basically said no, and we stopped it because we had to stem the bleeding. The answer, I think, here is the same answer that we did with kubeadm. We're like, we cannot plumb through all the different options that exist and keep on doing this over time because it's not sustainable. We're already in this like tech debt overload. We're trying to like at minimum pay our interest on the mortgage right now, to pay down what people have like, I don't know, drunkenly coded over the years. So that way we are in this point where we already have so much debt. I think we're just going to be in service of debt for the next like 6 months to a year with everyone who's working on this stuff because it's part-time effort at best. So I would say no. I think we can do better, and I think we should do better. If there are feature gate flags, like if there are feature gate flags that are enabled for a component, those things should be part of the component and easily detectable as part of their component configuration, right? So if you have a feature gate flag, you should be able to detect that as part of the component configuration for a feature or for a component or a feature, right? And that should be stored on cluster within the config map. It shouldn't be specify another parameter. It should be able to dynamically auto detect.
Yes. Go ahead.
No, I think I've ranted enough. Here, I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, the thing that I'm most scared about is that somebody's going to implement these flags for the framework, and then we're going to pump a lot of end-to-end testing jobs. that use these flags, and we're going to couple this with testing front. Then these people are going to disappear, and we have this legacy flag that nobody maintains.
Yeah.
And it's no longer a temporary flag. It's actually quite coupled between different repositories. And I'm going to continue the discussion here. We need, in my opinion, a method to have auto detection for this stuff. Because the component config is not there yet, maybe some tests are going to not depend on component feature gates, you know. So we have to have a way to detect if an IPv6, or if a couple of IPs are provided, maybe one of the IPs in the test is IPv4, the other one is IPv6, then this technically goes back already this particular test. So I'm trying to ask these questions, but I also lack some understanding why, like, what are they trying to do in the test? This is a quick fix. They see something failing. Hey, we can add a flag that says IPv6. I don't think this is the correct way to approach the problem, and I would expect more feedback from them.
Yeah, I've assigned myself on this issue too, so I should be able to respond back. Maybe I didn't. Now I am. I put a hold on it too. There is. We keep on doing this across the project with features, and there are certain features that no one seems to want to pay down, but there are other features that people want to like slam through because, I don't know, Google makes money on it. And we got to figure out the line here from a sustainability perspective. And maybe this is a SIG Arch discussion, to be honest. I think it is. I wouldn't mind picking a fight on this one, because I think there's not enough resources of component config, and I think it needs to be dealt with in that area. And,
yes.
And maybe I can. This gives me a good chance to like fight with Tim Hawken about something worthy to fight about.
So if we enable component config for the framework, we have to get rid of all the flags that already exist. And there's so many flags, and it's like so many people probably already depend on this, that I was at some point proposing that maybe we should do, framework .2, like pretty much create a new version already.
Well, we talked about this in the conformance working group, and I don't mind soliciting the idea of having listing down the requirements for a framework v2. What I don't want to see happen is us to try and do this weird human-animal hybrid where we start implementing the ideas for a new implementation given the current structure. I would rather see us start from requirements first about, if we could have a pony, what color would its hair be, and then nerd fight on the details and semantics, knowing what we know. And then when we actually get a proposal that looks clean, according to people who have been around this area of the code for long enough, then we might be able to resource that or get enough people to help out on that effort. But I think if we were to do like many of the other half-done jobs in Kubernetes, to just try and retrofit something, it would just be just as bad as this IPv4.6 patch, right? It would just be another hack in the system that would only live for a certain period of time.
Yes, I definitely agree. Component config is an absolute prerequisite for such a framework v2.
Mm-hmm.
We should definitely make this like a long-term plan for the framework, and we have to deal with what we have right now. As a comparison, kubetest v2 started, but I'm not convinced that the architecture of kubetest as a whole is very clear. And right now we're implementing something that is kubetest v2, but maybe there are underlying problems that have to be resolved first. And it's just an effort assigned to somebody to work on, but it's not very clear.
Oh, I'm ignoring kubetest v2. That's infra. I don't even know what they're doing. That's been sitting on the vine there for a long time, so it's not important to me right now. I do think that it's worthwhile to entertain the conversation of starting a specification, of identifying what are all the key features and issues that we see. And I don't think it's a bad idea for someone to start curating this, that we talk about it every week, at least a little bit, right? And maybe just make incremental, slow progress. At least if we were to do this, we would have at the end of the day a document that maybe we could farm out to someone else, given the fact that we are all part-time in this at best. What do folks think about that?
I think it's a good idea. Instead of having the tracking issues, do you mean something like doc where we define the future and the current problems of framework?
Basically a high-level proposal that outlines, here are the current problems that we see, here are the features we would like, here's the basic outline and shape of a pony, if I could have a pony. And then leave that as almost like a KEP style document.
I think an action item from the meeting 2 weeks ago was to look at other testing frameworks and figure out what we liked and don't like about them. That definitely slipped my radar. I didn't do that.
Well, how about as an action item for this one, to someone to take point on the initial creation of that document?
Wouldn't mind collaborating on that document with someone. This is Hippie. I'm also been tasked with exploring some alternate frameworks within the conformance working group, including Gherkin.
Yeah, I don't care about frameworks though. I want to make certain that we talk about that in detail. Like I care about the requirements before frameworks. So I looked at the Gherkin idea and proposal and document, and I don't want to create another hybrid. I want to make sure that we outline requirements and current problem space that we see, right? Like, for example, like our parallelization of the current framework and their ability to execute on subsuites doesn't exist, right? Like we have this weird problem where we have a set of tests within inside of the framework that we are not independent of one another, right? So like outlining requirements from stage 0 is way more important to me than talking about a given set of frameworks.
It used to be like one of the initiators of the work was Omichi, but we shouldn't really assign it to him because he's not present at the meeting. Maybe we should ask him if he wants to take point with Hippie on this, because he is already very knowledgeable in the framework. I personally have no understanding of what demands individual SIGs have with their tests from the framework. It's going to be very hard to obtain this information. You have to go and poke people, and it's really quite organic and cellular. Individual tests are scattered between different contributors. They come and go. So we don't have clear owners even in the individual SIGs.
Somebody needs to drive this, someone with experience. And I can help shepherd, but I'm not going to sign up to drive. I'm already overloaded as it is today, especially with cluster API-based work, getting that group on task. So I cannot honestly commit to being the main driver. I can commit to helping shepherd a main driver. And it would be a great experience to develop like sort of soup to nuts what it means to kind of refactor a good portion of the code, which is great if you're a new contributor, you want to earn your stripes in the community. But it is I'm not going to lie, this is going to be hard. It's going to be a slog.
I'd like to at least co-do that, if not step in that, helping being shepherded.
Yeah, I would also like to help on that point.
Okay, so maybe next time an action item is to have at least the formings of a Google Doc that we can start to discuss. So if somebody wants to write down that as an action item. Because we're all here and there's more people here, what do folks think about this meeting times? Does this work better for folks? It seems like we have a higher attendance.
Yes, from everyone.
I can try to make it work better. This overlaps with 2 other meetings I have, but I managed to get out of them early today.
Monday evening is one of the few days where I can go to the grocery store to buy food. And so, I mean, it's fine. I learn from time to time. Just wanted to let you guys know about this.
Well, we originally had Friday spec'd out as the time, but it didn't work out well for West Coast. And we did a quick vote last time about what time worked. I don't know if you have suggestions for maybe earlier time on Monday, which actually is not bad for me, but might be bad for West Coast. Maybe Lubomir, maybe you can poke Zhaitong to figure out a happy path between you two. And if they're like maybe an hour or 2 earlier works better, then that's okay.
Yes, if I'm not present, I can also watch the recordings. If something is super urgent, I guess I can skip my grocery shopping and be present. So it's fine for me this particular time.
I don't have any other group topics, and the agenda seems to be out. Are there other topics to discuss?
So I had a quick question. SIG testing is on the calendar to give an update at the community meeting this week, and I wanted to make sure I included updates from all of our sub-projects, testing commons being one of them. I was just going to go off of sort of what you have in the meeting notes as the sort of triage priority, but I wasn't sure if there were specific accomplishments that you wanted to talk about or specific like calls to action that you wanted.
I think the calls to action would be like help improve component config, because it would help this user experience problem we currently have with plumbing knobs all the way through the framework.
Okay.
So the call to action would be like, hey, we've had this documented approach for how we want to configure components inside of Kubernetes, so we expose features and knobs to the wild. And we've had it documented for, what year is this? I don't know. At least 2 years now. And we're still like not very far along with some of it.
Right.
And please go talk to Michael Taufin and Lucas and the component config working group.
Okay. Otherwise,
Steady progress on refactoring the framework as we get part-timers kind of flowing through this. But I would say it's been positive. You should be able to vendor the framework fairly cleanly. It's not like horrendous like it was before. It's better, and it's getting better.
Is there like a guide I could point people to on how to do that?
We should add part of this. Part of the action items for this list was that we should have a guidelines doc that George said he was going to work on, and he said to poke me first about where the location should be, and I said should be next to all the other stuff, which includes the tag references. But we should put a guidelines doc up and see if we can get that in place.
Okay. Yeah, this can be a more productive discussion I have offline with you, Tim. Once I have slides up and I can poke you for review, I just wanted to sort of poll the group. If there's anybody that wants to brag about something, it's a good forum to give credit to people, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'd love to give shout outs to everybody who's helped refactor the framework to make it importable.
I guess I should probably introduce myself. I've been sitting here listening, and I should sort of explain why I've shown up now and what we're hoping to get out of attending meetings like this. My name is Nick Pavey. I'm a QA professional, and I work for a large company that is proposing to do some large-scale work on Kubernetes. And I have very, very little experience with Kubernetes, but I do have a lot of experience in testing hardware and software. And I thought one of the things I'd do to get started is to try and understand how Kubernetes is tested and use that as a way into understanding what our testing strategy might be going forwards. Because we want to, at least I want to get a feel for what the stability of the Kubernetes environment might be. So I joined the SIG testing group a day or two ago, and this meeting came up, and I thought I'd come along and attend. And really what I'm looking for is kind of some information on the way in, how to sort of start to understand how the project is structured, how people go about developing tests, how people go about running tests. Are there things like test plans and descriptions and, really just a way of getting started. And I understand, this may not be the right forum, so if I'm in the wrong place, just let me know.
There's pieces that overlap across SIG testing and this group. Because there's the test automation aspects as well as the actual framework itself. I wish I had a good story that was easier for people who would want to view this in a systematic lens. There's pieces that are there, but the problem is it's a lot of tribal knowledge that has existed versus actually a set of well-documented, well-articulated features.
I feel like there, as with any large project that has lots of docs and lots of contributors, there are lots of different versions of documentation in different places that are in varying states of up-to-dateness, well-writtenness, clean editing, that sort of thing. What I posted a link to in chat is the testing section in the contributors guide. We tend to recommend that all new contributors to the Kubernetes community check out this guide in its entirety if possible, because it sort of talks about the structure and governance of the project as a whole. And I linked you to the section specifically on testing, how Kubernetes itself sort of has like 3 layers of testing, unit integration, end-to-end, and some links to sort of docs that describe that stuff. There are all sorts of other aspirational docs about like good practices and ways to write tests that I suspect are out of date. But I feel like this is a good landing page to start and to get you to figure out like what are the next questions that you would like to ask.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the way that documents can vary in their quality and accuracy and up-to-dateness, so that's not a problem at all. Really, I think this is probably what I was looking to get, is really just a way to start to understand how the project works, and my objective is eventually to start to get a feel for how much we could actually trust the Kubernetes platform to remain stable if we put large-scale production loads onto it.
Okay, that's fair. So you're in what's called a sub-project. The Kubernetes project is broken up into a bunch of special interest groups. Special interest groups sort of are parents of sub-projects which can own one or more repositories or pieces of code. This is the testing common sub-project, which is all about sort of the actual test frameworks and the writing of the tests. SIG testing sort of as an umbrella is about, okay, we don't actually write the tests for people, right? We just want to enable the best practices and have the tools available for people to write tests, and then make sure that they are run and their results are collected and used and displayed in an effective manner. And I'm actually supposed to be summarizing what it is that we have done, what it is we are planning on doing over the next quarter. So SIG testing has a meeting tomorrow at 1:30 Pacific, and I'll be giving an update of the community. The community meeting is just sort of the focal point for the project. That's Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific.
Okay, hang on a minute, I'm just going to make sure. So I have SIG testing 4 to 4:30 East Coast time tomorrow.
Yeah.
You said there was something on Thursday as well.
Yeah, just sort of the community meeting for the project as a whole.
Okay. where would I get myself hooked up with that?
I believe if you join the Kubernetes dev list, you get a calendar invite for that. I may be wrong. If I am wrong, just a second. It's somewhere in the community repo. Trying to find it.
So the way I typically do it is I go through and I have a copy of the community calendar, and that actually is documented for how to do this. And then you copy whatever meetings you need to go to in the community onto your local calendar for you to get subscribed.
That's, the community calendar is what, shared as a Google something or other?
Yes, and there is documentation on how to copy the community calendar. I'm sure if you do Kubernetes community calendar as your Google search, you will find all the documents that Contribix has created around it.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But,
okay, communitymeeting.md.
yeah, looking forward to having you seeing where you can contribute. That's sort of how this special interest group started in the first place. Was we needed to make sure that the project was well tested in a sane and effective manner, and that contributors from all across the project could actually contribute in meaningful ways, be that code, tools, test results, opinions, tests, things of that nature.
Yeah, you know, we have a sort of a tactical need right now, which is just to sort of understand the stability. But in the longer term, I've spent pretty much all of my career in the testing framework space. So, you know, this sounds like this is a compatible place to be.
We would love help. Patch is welcome. As you heard from the earlier conversation piece about starting a document to overhaul what we would like, I think if you're interested and have resources and time to devote towards this plus experience, I think that would be a great way to have feedback come in, especially if you have years of experience to outline the good, the bad, the ugly, and we can talk about the good, the bad, the ugly that we've seen with Kubernetes.
Sure, yeah, that would be great. I could probably do something along those lines. You know, the usual thing is time, but we're putting an awful lot of emphasis onto distributed containerized environments, so I feel like it probably shouldn't be too hard to justify.
Great. Well, by next meeting, hopefully George and Hippie will have the formation of a doc that we can start to discuss. In the meantime, there's the existing backlog, which has actually been prioritized at the top of this document, which outlines umbrella issues that of the current work items that we're trying to do.
Okay. Would you be able to just put that doc into the chat, something, so I can? One of the problems I'm having is that Kubernetes documentation is both voluminous and sparse at the same time, and trying to find the right documentation with the right content is it's a bit of a challenge when you're first starting up.
Yep, I hear you. Usually the TLDR for every meeting inside of Kubernetes is to go to the community repo, look at the SIG or subproject, and they should have all their meeting agenda notes linked from that community section.
So Kubernetes, so just do a search community meeting, right?
I'll give you the link here.
Yeah,
so there's
great. Okay.
So inside of the community repo, which I just sent, there is a separate subsection which Aaron just sent, which is the SIG testing.
Okay. So I'm just trying to get myself. So when you say community repo, the way that's manifesting when I click on the link is a Google Doc. Is that what you would expect?
There's two links. One is a Google Doc, and the link below the one I just sent you is the community repo from GitHub.
GitHub, okay. Okay, I got it, yeah. Okay, that's And that would be for the testing special interest group, right?
Yes.
Okay, I've got it. Okay. Oh, well, thanks very much for sending these links. It's I had come across this before, so that's good. At least I was on the right track. So thanks very much. We're very nearly at time, so I'll be quiet now.
Are there any other last topics other than I'm going to ask Lubomir and Jaitom to maybe talk offline to figure out if an hour earlier helps Lubomir go to the grocery store, which I'm hoping the answer is yes. So with that in mind, I'll just call it. We've got 2 minutes, so.
Yeah, I could live with an hour earlier for what it's worth. That would be good.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Happy Monday.
Okay, thanks, folks.
Bye.
Bye.